You think that measly $50,000 will stop me? Cute. He said it like he was brushing crumbs off an Armani cuff, the laugh clipped and automatic. By Christmas, I'll be sipping champagne in Tuscany with your money. Have you ever watched someone so sure they're winning that they forgot how the rules worked? Have you ever seen arrogance so loud it drowned common sense? I didn't know at the time that those words were the opening gambit of a plan that would end with him flat on his face in a packed courtroom, humiliated in front of everyone who'd ever let him lean on them. But I did know one thing. I was the executor of my uncle's will, and I was not about to let a spoiled nephew turn 2 lifetimes of careful work into his next exotic vacation. What would you do if someone you loved, or someone you tolerated, decided to sue their family for greed? "You're too stupid to even see what's coming," he said into his phone one night, and I had that text screen grabbed before he could delete it. But I had no idea what I was about to discover. Part 1. The Deception. Uncle Arthur built something people only read about now in business school case studies. He bought houses in Seattle when they were cheap, invested in patents, and this was the part that gets his name passed around in late-night Bitcoin threads. He'd bought Bitcoin in 2009 and 2010 the way normal people bought coffee. By the time he died, his estate, the number they'll mention in the papers, tallied to $847 million. $847 million. It felt obscene to say it out loud at family dinners. He left a very specific will. It cut out the nephew, Tim, from any major share of the estate. Tim got the things a spoiled man might brag about: some watches, a vintage Tesla, and the $50,000 line item everyone called the joke. The big chunk went to a trust for mental health initiatives and a handful of very specific friends and charities he didn't trust his bloodline to handle. I was named executor because I was the only one he'd ever admitted could read his handwriting without squinting. He called me practical. I called myself deeply sleep-deprived in the weeks after the funeral. Tim burst into my office at Harrison and Pike like he was storming a frat house. He was wearing an Armani suit he never owned while he lived with his mother, hair perfect, breath smelling faintly of whatever import he referred to as business dinners. "So this is your stunt?" he barked. 50 grand? You hide the rest? Mom says that's not what he would have wanted." I kept my voice steady. "The will's clear. Uncle Arthur made his choices." He laughed. "Clear? I'll make this disappear. I'm going to take you for everything you've got." The lawyer he hired, White Shoe, the kind of guy who smells of cologne and litigation, closed his briefcase and added, "We're filing for undue influence, fraud, and we'll be in court next week." I remember the judge's name now because the TV crew spelled it on their red badges later. Judge Ramirez. But that was later. Right then, Tim's arrogance felt like a physical wall. I felt something in my chest, equal parts anger and a weird, relieved satisfaction. Because Uncle Arthur had always told me to expect treachery. Little did they know, I had printed a folder that night with everything I'd ever saved from the house. The will, our texts, Ring doorbell clips, some old receipts, and, this looked stupid then, a creased index card with a line of words on it that read like a bad crossword. But then, I found the messages. 47 deleted messages from Tim to a group named Exit Plan, saved in the cloud backup. There it was. "He's an old man. No one will notice. We should contest when he dies. I'll sign off on anything." 47 deleted messages. Not one, not two, 47. Deleting doesn't delete from the cloud forensics team. I had them printed in black and white like receipts from a crime. We had a micro cliffhanger the first week. Tim staged a screaming YouTube video about family treachery. He called me greedy and posted it. Views exploded. Good for him, bad for us. But through that storm of comments and live interviews, I got another text from him that made my stomach drop. "You can't hide the wallet." I know he had more. He was willing to go nuclear. He was willing to burn everything down. Have you ever been accused of stealing from someone you swore you protected? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done first? Part 2, the discovery. If this had been a movie, the next part would be me riffling through skein-bound ledgers by candlelight. But it was actually Margaret Chen, My lawyer, a woman who smelled the peppermint gum and knew probate law like other people know directions. Margaret had the stare of someone who'd argued with a bank and won. Most will contests fizzle, she said. But the danger with this one is publicity. When he goes loud, he digs. And he will dig. I have the screenshots, I said. The deleted messages, the ring footage. He was at the house 2 nights before the funeral, rifling through the office. Good, she said. We need more than proof of intent. We need the direct mechanism he thinks he can reach for. What we didn't know was the scale of Uncle Arthur's quiet obsession. It wasn't just houses and patents. He'd been an early Bitcoin buyer, the kind of guy who kept a paper wallet in a shoebox and told no one because he loved the silence of holding something valuable and unspoken. He called it his secret hedge. What happened next still gives me chills. Margaret had a contact, an analyst named Javier, who specialized in cryptocurrency forensics. He came to the office, hair in a careful mess, laptop screens like a spaceship. Blockchain's a ledger, Javier said. If there was an old paper wallet, someone probably moved funds long ago. But if the private keys were physically kept, like a note, then they're as real as cash in a deposit box. The issue is custody. He put up a public ledger address on the screen, a string of numbers and letters. I remember thinking how banal it looked, how nonchalant, until he hit enter and the dollar sign fell out like a bomb. It was bought in 2010, he said. That address held about 12,000 BTC at its peak. I did quick math with my head. No calculator, just that stupid internal vertigo you get when the world shows you a new coordinate. By then current rates, that wallet had pushed into the double hundreds of millions. That number hit me the way a winter gust hits, sharp and immediate. He'd left a joke of 50 grand and a small cigar box in the will. And somewhere in the handwriting was a clue. What he's doing is playing on people, Tim's lawyer sneered later. But by then, Margaret had already trailed old deposit boxes, checked bank records in Bellevue, and subpoenaed records from a small locksmith store that Uncle Arthur used. I sat in the church basement once more, with a box of copies and a battered hymnal Arthur used as a ledger. There, between the hymns, he'd written a sequence of words. It looked like a poem. It looked like nonsense. It was the words of a seed phrase, 12 words you didn't need if you were normal. But if you knew Bitcoin, you could feel the hair stand up on your neck like static. You won't believe what I found next, Javier told me when we presented this to the team. He didn't hide it in a bank. He hid it in plain sight. He left a paper wallet and cipher in that hymnal, the seed phrase. And here's the kicker. The will had a no contest clause. Contest the will and you forfeit your share. 2 years of lies had been simmering under the surface, but the law was clean. No contest clauses are enforceable in many states. If Tim contested, he would be in danger of losing even the small line item. If he contested with malice, proof the court found, there'd be a forfeiture that routed the bit of inheritance elsewhere. It was a trap and an opportunity. Part 3, the preparation. We planned like chess players who'd learned not just the moves, but the tells. Margaret was a machine. Let him file, she said. Let him scream. He needs to invite discovery. Every subpoena, every demand for documents is a thread he pulls. We'll be waiting on the other end. The first threatened failure came fast. The judge granted a discovery window, and Tim's team tried to seize the hymnal, the box, anything marked by Arthur's handwriting. They petitioned for emergency access to the safety deposit box. The bank, predictably, tightened up. The clerk at the bank, a young woman who'd known Arthur before, she cried on the phone when we explained, said the box could only be opened by a court order. That's your window, Margaret said. But it also gives us time to set counters. We had 3 moments where it felt like the plan would crumble. Setback 1. Tim hired a ghost of a records company that tried to discredit the hymnal by claiming the handwriting didn't match. They brought in a shaky expert who said, could be, which in law is a dangerous phrase. For a week, it looked like the court might accept that as enough doubt to allow Tim to keep digging into the rest of the estate. But then, what happened next? Margaret found an old letter Uncle Arthur wrote to his college buddy, mentioning the hymn book specifically as his bit stash. That plus the forensic handwriting report we ordered, discredited their expert in open cross-examination. Micro cliffhanger avoided. Setback 2. Someone leaked a screenshot to the press. The address on the blockchain. Overnight, conspiracy theorists and crypto vultures started DMing our office. Tim's people painted us as hoarders of the Bitcoin, and a flurry of online abuse hit our team's phones. I began to question whether going public was moral. After all, funds were technically unclaimed. The headlines read, "Family Feud over Bitcoin Fortune." They didn't print the no contest clause paragraph that would be the real killer. It was ugly, but Margaret kept level. "Let them scream," she said. "Noise washes off in court." Setback 3. The bank's security camera, Ring style, had gone missing for a crucial 3-hour window the night Arthur's office was accessed. Someone, it seemed, had been thorough. Who had the motive? Tim's late-night visit? A neighbor? A petty thief? The absence of video looked like a perfect ambiguous gap Tim's lawyers could exploit as manufacturing evidence. If they convinced the judge the hymnal was planted, the whole thing would blow up. I almost panicked. If we lost custody of the physical seed phrase, there was nothing to force the no contest clause to do. But Javier found a receipt for a locksmith job and a credit card swipe at a diner where Tim's lawyer had been the night the footage vanished. It was small, but it was a thread that, when we pulled, loosened the rest. Throughout it all, Tim never stopped being arrogant. One of his messages, "This is the line I keep with me," said he's going to hand me a cigar box and I'll act nothing happened. Then I'll be flying out with the rest. He said it in a video sent to a friend. We had the friend testify later. That was the moment I stopped feeling sorry for him. Have you ever watched someone dig their own grave with words? If you were in my shoes and had the documents, would you have played it public or private? Part 4. The confrontation. Court didn't smell like drama yet. It smelled like old coffee and cheap air conditioner. The courtroom filled with cardboard tabloids, my family, Tim's entourage, and a contingent of crypto reporters who'd flown in with their own slang and a lot of assumptions. Tim walked in like he'd expected applause. He sat down, chin up. I sat across from him. Hands folded around a thick stack of documents that felt heavier than they had any right to. The judge looked at both of us like someone trying to pick which of 2 children would survive an amusement park drop. Here's the dialogue I remember like a set piece. Judge Ramirez. Counsel, present your case. Tim's lawyer. Your Honor. The beneficiary contests the will on grounds of undue influence and lack of capacity. We believe the small bequests are a cover-up for assets misdirected by the executor. Margaret stood up slowly. She had the letter from Arthur and the hymnal. She had the forensic handwriting, and most important, she had the will's clause. Margaret, Your Honor, we don't need to speculate. The will is explicit. Clause 16 contains a no contest provision that states any beneficiary who challenges the will forfeits their bequest. The decedent further provided specific instructions that the item listed as miscellaneous personal effects includes a paper wallet with a seed phrase. Tim's lawyer jumped in. Objection, speculation. You can't just pull claims about cryptocurrency and call it a will. Judge Ramirez, sustained. Little did they know Margaret had anticipated the objection. She slid a certified copy of the will to the clerk and read aloud, slowly, the language Arthur had written and initialed himself. It is my explicit wish, she read, that any beneficiary who contests this will shall forfeit their bequest, and said bequest shall be transferred to the Arthur Memorial Fund for Mental Health, which shall apply said funds to initiatives laid out in Exhibit C. The court clerk, following protocol, entered the clause into the record. Tim's color drained a little. Margaret then asked for permission to retrieve the hymnal, and the hymnal was produced, its pages slightly warped, a postage stamp of dust. She opened to the place where the seed phrase had been written in uncle hand. It was small, tidy, a candlelit, old man careful handwriting that made my throat pinch. Margaret, we will submit handwriting authentication, But more immediately, the defendant, as you know, has already filed to contest. Under state law, the no contest clause is triggered under these circumstances. The bequest in question, designated by my client as miscellaneous personal effects, is therefore forfeited. Tim's lawyer: Your Honor, that's punitive and unconstitutional. Judge Ramirez: I will rule on the motion to enforce the no contest clause. Counsel presenting evidence. What did I expect? A slam dunk? No. This is court. We were ready for the normal human ugliness. Tim's lawyer pulled out a surprise: a declaration from a third party claiming the seed phrase had been altered after the will. Suddenly, for a half hour, we were on our heels. It felt like the plan would fail. But then, Javier printed the blockchain ledger on the big screen. He showed the public address and the transaction history in excruciating detail. He showed a transfer that had occurred days after the funeral. The large Bitcoin balance had been moved. Transferred, moved. The destination address, he showed, had been controlled by the Arthur Memorial Fund's custodian account. There was a public key and a signed certificate confirming an on-record transfer to the fund, executed by the trustee when the court clerk recorded the will's enforcement. The courtroom gasped. Tim did what people do when air leaves their lungs. His jaw went slack. Tim: No, you can't do that. He didn't mean me. He meant exactly that, I said. My voice didn't waver. I remember feeling very small and very gigantic all at once. He knew you'd complain. He said it out loud sometimes. He put the words in the will. He always said you'd need a lesson. Mr. Thompson, Tim's lawyer hissed, this is harassment of the beneficiary. Judge Ramirez: Order. The courts recognize will provisions. The provision is incorporated and the evidence supports its enforcement. The bequest is forfeited as provided. The court finds in favor of the executor. For a beat, there was silence so loud you could hear breath in the back row. Tim's face, which had been composed for months, now took on a different shape. The shape of someone who'd bet on everyone else losing and instead found his own hand folded. He opened his mouth, perhaps to beg, perhaps to scream. By Christmas, I'll be sipping champagne in Tuscany with your money, he had told an old friend not long before. The newspapers that got his quote were now running, Man who sued family loses inheritance, with a side-by-side of his smiling Instagram shot. He stood, red-eyed, walked out, and did that modern thing of making a few live Instagram stories where he alternated between sobbing and blaming me for ruining a legacy. I still have those clips. I have the screenshots if you don't believe me. Part 5. The Aftermath. Life after a big win in probate court is quieter than people think. It isn't fireworks, it's paper and procedure. The Arthur Memorial Fund, which Uncle Arthur had seeded, now held the funds and transferred them to mental health clinics in Seattle, Bellevue, and even a small program in rural Oregon Arthur always loved. That felt good. Tim disappeared off our doorstep. He lost paychecks from the consultancy he freelanced for. The firm said the bad publicity was intolerable. People stopped taking social calls from him. He moved back home and took a part-time job at a boutique in Bellevue, selling dresses to people he'd once thought would buy them for him. I saw him once, stacking hangers, and the expression on his face was stripped of everything but survival. He'd been humiliated publicly, yes, but he was also, in a quiet way, facing the consequences of entitlement. Does that make me cruel? Maybe. You be the judge. As for me, people ask if I felt guilty. Sometimes. There were nights I lay awake thinking about whether Arthur's instructions were cruel in their cunning. He'd tightened the legal screws in ways that made it unlikely anyone could spin the will into a courtroom circus. But he also wanted to make sure his life's work didn't end up as champagne money for someone who thought the world owed him everything. The law upheld that intention. Margaret got a real estate client from the exposure. Javier kept doing crypto forensics and sends me Christmas cards. I met someone, Sarah, a patent attorney. She laughed when I told her I wasn't really broke. A person who can orchestrate something that sophisticated is never really broke, she said. He's just creatively liquid. Have you ever watched injustice get corrected slowly and then suddenly? Anyone who's been through divorce or probate knows how vindictive legal paperwork can be. Would you have enforced the no contest clause? Or let Tim have his 50 grand to spare him humiliation? There are a couple of facts that still stop me cold. 1. The estate's listed net worth, $847 million, a number you can find in the public probate records if you look. 2. The 47 deleted messages that showed intent to contest and coordinate. 3. The way 2 years of lies and entitlement can turn someone into a public spectacle. What would you have done if you were named executor and a relative threatened to sue? Tell me I'm not crazy for what I did next. I'd like to hear voices that think I overstepped. Was I wrong to push the law in the direction Uncle Arthur had clearly wanted? Some people told me after that I went too far. Others sent me private messages telling me they'd have done the same. The internet decided immediately. I was villain or hero, depending on whether you liked bitter justice. Little did they know, though, the biggest revenge wasn't money changing hands. It was the quiet satisfaction of seeing a man who'd been raised to think he deserved the world discover that the world has rules, sometimes ruthless, sometimes fair, and that rules can swallow arrogance whole. What you won't see in the headlines is that the Arthur Memorial Fund now runs a small therapy fund for adolescents in Seattle East Side schools. He'd wanted that. He wanted to ensure the estate did something meaningful instead of funding a life of vacations for the greedy. I visit the clinic sometimes and watch teenagers in group therapy. Some of them used to be my students' younger cousins. It feels like the world tilted back into place a little. Would you have done anything differently? If you were me, an executor with a binder and a handwritten clue, would you have gone public in court or tried to settle quietly? Drop your answers in the comments. Tell me I'm not crazy, or tell me I was right. I'm reading. If you want more stories like this, people who weaponize paperwork, families that implode over money, and the small legal twists that become spectacular payoffs, there are dozens more I can tell. Subscribe, hit that bell, and let me know. Have you ever had to defend something that didn't belong to you? What did you do?